Most people know Dr. Gary Chapman for the 5 love languages in relationships. But what you may not know is how powerful these principles are in the workplace. In this video, Dr. Gary Chapman and I are talking about how understanding your team's love language can completely change how you lead, motivate, and inspire them. In this conversation, you'll learn how the 5 love languages were discovered in a business context. Whether you manage one person or 100, this conversation will give you insight into bringing out the best in your people. So we're here with Dr. Gary Chapman that wrote the 5 love languages. And before I got a chance to meet you, I have to admit, I hadn't heard of it. And now when I find out that everybody else in the world has heard about it and I hadn't heard about it until last year, you and I had gotten the chance to actually speak at a couples retreat. And if you can imagine, having the doctor of 5 love languages, speaking, and a sales speaker, I had to look at Hunter Ballou and I'm like, this is going to be a lot of fun, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it does make sense because we all sell something, right? We sell ourselves to our spouse, our kids, and vice versa. But Dr. Gary, I really want to know, how did you come up with the 5 love languages?
Well, they grew out of my counseling. I'll never forget the first time it dawned on me what makes one person feel loved does not make another person feel loved.
No.
When the wife said in the counseling setting, I just don't feel any love coming from him, and I feel so empty inside. He said, I don't understand that. I do everything I can to show her that I love her, and she sits there and tells you what she's been telling me. She doesn't feel loved. I don't know what else I could do. I said, well, what do you do to show your love for her? He said, well, I come home from work before she does, so I start the evening meal. And after dinner, he said, I wash the dishes every night. On Thursday, I vacuum the floors. On Saturday, I wash her car, I mow the grass, I help her with the laundry, and he went on, and I was beginning to wonder, what does this woman do? Sounded to me like he was doing everything. And she sits there and says she doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else I could do. I looked back at her, and she said, he's right. He's a hard-working man. She said, but we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years. He's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes, vacuuming the floors. And I realized here was a sincere husband who was loving his wife in the best way he knew how, but he wasn't connecting with her emotionally. And after that, I had story after story in my office with a similar story. And I knew there had to be a pattern to it. So eventually, I read several years of notes that I had written and asked myself, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? Mm-hmm. What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages and started using it in my counseling. And probably 5 years later, I thought if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language of the common person, leave out psychological terms that many people would not understand, maybe I could help a lot of couples I would never have time to see in my office. So that's where it came from.
That is fantastic. And after we got, my wife has known about you for a long time, and after we got that opportunity, we found that my wife and I are very similar in our love languages. It's positive affirmations, the physical touch, as well as quality time. And so we try to do that as often as possible. But I'm a lot like the guy that you just mentioned. I would go out and do all this stuff, and I felt like it would make up for all the time that I wouldn't be at home because I'm always traveling.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what she wanted.
Yeah.
She really I could not do any of it. Sorry, honey. But I could not do any of it, and as long as I was at home, she'd be fine.
Yeah. If we don't receive love in what I call our primary love language, all of them are fine, but if we don't receive it in our primary language, we're not likely to feel loved, even though the person is expressing some of the other languages. Mm-hmm. But I say to people, don't ever hear me saying you only speak the primary language. You give heavy doses of the primary, but you sprinkle in the other 4. Extra credit for that, okay?
Yes. Now, we can also do this with customers, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's obviously we look at this with relationships, but there's more than just intimate relationships.
Yeah.
If you knew the love language of your customers, if it just happened to come out during the time when you're talking with them about anything other than what you're trying to sell them, that when you have that opportunity, if it is a gift that they like gifts or they like positive affirmations, sometimes petting the homeowner when you know that it's a positive affirmation can really help that relationship grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter what the human relationship is. Everybody has the emotional need to feel loved or to feel appreciated. In the workplace, we might call it appreciated rather than love, but it's the same basic emotional need that I'm valued as a person, And so, yes, I think if we happen to know what their primary language is, if we don't, we can kind of sprinkle in all of them a little bit, And typically, they kind of, on the one that's their primary, they'll kind of, you'll see a different response from them.
That is really good. Maybe you and I need to write a book together. No, I'm just kidding. No, that is really good.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that there is, like you mentioned, the love languages inside the workplace.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I wrote that with Dr. Paul White, who is a psychologist.
He's here this week.
He's here.
Okay.
He's here. And at that time, he had 20 years experience working with business leaders. And he came to me with the idea. He said, Gary, I think we need to take the love languages to work. And he gave me the results of 2 research projects. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something like 70% of the people in the country who have a job say they feel little appreciation at work. And I think it was 64% of the people that leave a job and go to another job said they left primarily because they didn't feel appreciated where they were. And when he shared that, I said, well, obviously the need is there. But I said, you need to do some research and let's make sure it works. So he did. He went into several businesses, hair salons to construction companies, gave them a job satisfaction test, then shared the concept of the 5 appreciation languages at work, and then got them to take the quiz to find out what everybody's appreciation language is. So all the groups that interface would do that. And then he went back a year later, gave another job satisfaction test. In every case, it was statistically improved. And that's when I said, let's write the book. It's been very, very successful. And I told him, I said, now when this book comes out, I'm counting on you to carry the freight. My passion is marriage and family. Yours is business. I'm not going to change my passion. And he's done a great job with it.
Fantastic. Now, this has all grown. So can you kind of take us through the evolution since 1992 when you decided to write it the first time to today? What's the evolution of how this has grown?
Well, of course, there have been many spin-off books. One on how this applies with children, the 5 love languages of children. That was the second in the series for parents. And then 5 love languages of teenagers for parents. Mm-hmm. Then one for in a blended family, how it works in a blended family with children, how it works with special needs children, how it helps when you've lost a child at birth or shortly thereafter, how it helps the couple process things. One for caregivers of dementia patients, wrote it with a medical doctor his wife had the disease. And so a lot of spin-offs in how it applies in various relationships. But the original book has now been published in over 50 languages around the world, and a number of my books are in other languages. I was in Hungary before the pandemic, and they'd published 32 of my books in Hungarian.
Wow.
I was blown away. So it's all really the love languages, as well as many of my books, are all over the world now, which is just super encouraging and very amazing to me. It's beyond me.
So those people that, the 2 people that are watching that haven't bought the book, because I think everybody else has, how can they find? Is it something they can just get on Amazon?
Yeah. They can get it on Amazon. They can get it at Books and was it Barnes and Noble?
Barnes and Noble. I don't know if they're still open.
There's Books A Million also.
Yeah.
Amazon, or they can go to 5lovelanguages.com and get a little blurb on all of my books, and they can order them there if they like. Just the number 5lovelanguages.com.
Thanks for watching this conversation with Dr. Gary Chapman. I hope that it gave you a fresh perspective on how the 5 love languages can transform not just your relationships, but also your workplace and your sales team. Drop a comment and let us know which love language you see most in your workplace. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations that help you grow as a sales leader. Make sure that you take this and share it with your team.